What's going on behind the scenes with your favorite Voice America show or host? For the latest news, visit the iRadio blog at iradioblog.com.
The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
There are 4 major principles to living a healthier and better life: nutrition, exercise, hygiene, and love. Find out more about these principles today on The Joys of Healthy Living with your host, Dr. Ed Dodge. When you learn from Dr. Dodge and his guest experts, you'll discover how to apply these 4 lifestyle principles to benefit your health and your life. Now, here's Dr. Ed Dodge.
Welcome to The Joys of Healthy Living. In this show, we're dedicated to exploring the keys to healthy living. These include good food, healthy exercise, a clean environment, and caring relationships. Together, these add up to a healthy, joyful lifestyle which can do wonders for anyone. But we often find that we have problems that we run into, obstacles, and we need to know how to deal with those too. One of the problems that many of us have in this everywhere around the world, actually, is the problem of sugar addiction. And today, our guest is going to talk to us a good bit about the problem of sugar addiction, what sugar does to our health, and so it's going to be a very enlightening session. Dr. Richard Johnson is the chief of the renal and high blood pressure section at the University of Colorado. And he's a practicing physician, so he knows exactly what sorts of problems patients deal with. So we'll be talking about sugar today. Dr. Johnson, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to our show today.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here.
Oh, thank you. You've written the book, The Sugar Fix, several years ago, and I read that book several years ago, and I was very impressed with it. The information that you share with it about sugar is vast, actually. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about sugar today, its role in obesity, diabetes, and the cascade of diseases that stem with diabetes.
Sure. So sugar is commonly, its actual name is sucrose, and it consists of a molecule of glucose and fructose. And there's another sweetener as well. It's called high fructose corn syrup. And it contains glucose and fructose mixed freely together. These are the 2 major types of sugar or added sugars that are currently being used in America. And they are today there's a very huge intake of these sugars. They've been added to lots of foods. The high fructose corn syrup has been added to many foods. And our research suggests that it's the fructose component of table sugar and high fructose corn syrup that may have a very, very major role in driving the epidemic of obesity and diabetes.
Okay, so the fructose is the worst problem.
Yes, so we have very good evidence that fructose, which is a component of sugar and a component of high fructose corn syrup, can cause significant health problems, obesity, diabetes, fatty liver, inflammation, kidney trouble, and, even high blood pressure. And so go ahead.
How does it do all of this? And about how much are we consuming on the average? Do we have any figures on that?
The actual numbers vary a little bit depending on which group you talk to and if it's based upon how much people are actually ingest from diet questionnaires versus how much is disappearing from the shelves. But suffice it to say that we are probably, based on disappearance data, where the average person's eating almost 150 pounds of sugar a year. So that's a lot of sugar. So there's a lot of, people are definitely eating way more sugar than we were, 50 years ago. And that when I say sugar, I'm referring to both high fructose corn syrup and table sugar. The reason we think fructose is particularly bad is based upon several discoveries that our group did, and as well as other groups have made. And one of the aspects is that fructose can induce features of metabolic syndrome, such as fatty liver, insulin resistance, elevated blood pressure, elevated triglycerides, lower HDL cholesterol. It can do all of those things in animals, whereas if you feed the animal the same number of calories of starch or glucose, they do not get that effect. So it's something specific to fructose. And in fact, we have done studies where we have calorically restricted animals. We basically put them on a diet. They're eating about 90% of what they normally eat. But if the diet is enriched in sugar as opposed to starch, the animals will develop features of metabolic syndrome. They get massive fatty liver. They will eventually become diabetic, at least in the study that we published. And whereas the starch-fed animals don't. So so this has challenged a few concepts, because everyone had thought that, to develop fatty liver and to get insulin resistance, you have to actually get really big and fat. But in fact, we can separate weight gain from the ability of fructose to cause metabolic syndrome by calorically restricting an animal, and yet if it's still eating a lot of sugar, it won't gain weight, but it will become filled with fat, have fatty liver, have insulin resistance, and eventually become diabetic. So the first big discovery that is that it's not just about calories. Fructose causes problems even under caloric restriction. And true, if you're calorically restricted, you're not going to gain weight. These animals don't gain weight, but their livers still fill up with fat. They still become insulin resistant. They still develop high blood pressure. So all those problems can be separated from weight gain.
So fructose has this toxic effect on the body, and it seems to be fructose in particular that triggers this. Why? How does fructose do this?
Well, fructose does this through its metabolism. So we know that when fructose is ingested, it is taken up in the liver, as well as a few other places in the body. But the liver is one of the major sites. When it gets in a liver cell, it is metabolized by a specific enzyme. And I hate to bring up a name no one's ever heard of before, but the enzyme is called fructokinase. And this is a very different enzyme than other enzymes because it metabolizes fructose so fast that it depletes the energy of the cell in so doing. It takes some energy to actually do metabolism. When you metabolize anything, you consume some energy before you make it. So
Sure.
all food, when you eat food, you metabolize the food, and that costs some energy, and then you produce energy from it. But in normal foods, when they start consuming energy, if they consume too much energy, the cell quits metabolizing it until it builds its energy up. So under normal circumstances, the energy of a cell never goes down to dangerously low levels. Okay. But with fructose, when a cell metabolizes fructose, there's no check and balance. And the energy in the cell goes down very low. And we measure the energy as a substance called ATP. And the ATP levels fall very low. And this triggers an inflammatory response in the cell. And the cell actually tries to accumulate fat as almost a protective mechanism. So the cell starts to try to hold on to fat and produces an inflammation and releases inflammatory mediators into the blood. And so when you give fructose to animals, they show systemic inflammation, they develop high blood pressure, they get fatty liver, and it's through that mechanism. And we actually have found that when we knock that enzyme out so that an animal like a mouse doesn't express that enzyme, they do very well. They live very long. They don't get fat with sugar. They're really protected. So we know that. You're right.
Even if they get fructose, if they don't have the fructokinase, the fructose doesn't bother them? That's correct. And in fact, there's some very lucky humans out there who lack this enzyme, and none of them have ever been reported to develop, obesity. So we believe this is key. And actually, we have new data, which we're preparing to submit, that shows that the way carbs work, even when there's no fructose in the carbs, is through this pathway. And in fact, your body, the liver, can make fructose from carbs. So it doesn't even absolutely require the sugar to make the, to deliver the fructose. You can actually, under some circumstances, make fructose from carbs that you eat. And we believe that that's why low-carb diets, like the Atkins diet, are so protective, because it's actually all about fructose. And it's either the fructose that you eat, which is primarily from added sugars, or in some cases, the fructose that you make. But it looks like in the normal animal, almost all of the fructose you get is coming from the diet. So although the body can make some fructose from carbs, most of the fructose is actually from the carbs that contain fructose, like added sugars like sucrose and table sugar and high fructose corn syrup. So to put that in perspective for humans, probably we get most of our fructose from added sugar, either sucrose or the fructose that's in the processed foods. Right. Now, people always ask me, they say, what about natural fruits? They have fructose too. In fact, the name fructose comes from fruit sugar. Sure. Well, so it turns out we've actually studied this. And natural fruits contain small amounts of fructose compared to like a Coca-Cola or a soft drink. But they also, natural fruits contain lots of good things that like vitamin C and antioxidants and resveratrol, quercetin, flavonols, potassium, fiber. And it turns out that a lot of these substances block the metabolic actions of fructose. So natural fruits turn out to be pretty darn safe, and I recommend them. Now, in the sugar fix, I actually, at that point, I didn't really know because we hadn't done the studies. So I was a little bit nervous then about recommending large amounts of, recommending fruit. But our studies now suggest that natural fruits are really healthy because they have these wonderful substances that block the effects of fructose. Now, there is an exception. There's two exceptions. One, dried fruits, which we all love. I love dried fruits. I know you probably do too. Yeah, exactly. Mango and apricots. But when you dry a fruit, you actually get rid of most of the good things, unfortunately. So a lot of the antioxidants and so forth are left, and what you are removed, and you're left with a tasty thing that's pretty much sugar. So unfortunately, I don't recommend dried fruits. Well, that's good to know. Yeah. And the other thing is that fruit juice. You have to be really careful with fruit juice, because when you drink a fruit juice, you often drink the equivalent of 3 or 4 fruits. And you do that in about 3 minutes or 5 minutes. You'll see kids guzzle their fruit juices. And when that happens, they're basically getting a very large load of sugar, a large load of fructose. And even though there are antioxidants in fruit juices, when you get a big slug of fructose, the liver sees a lot of it in a short time. And so the concentration of fructose that hits the liver cell turns out to be relatively high. And that is what, the higher the fructose concentration, the more the energy depletion in the cell, because it's going to relate to the concentration the cell sees. Okay. And that's why fruit juices
have been associated with obesity. And that's why the Pediatric Society says, hold back on fruit juices in children. Don't give more than 4 to 6 ounces a day to a child. So that's the reason, is because when you drink a large amount fast, the liver gets to see a large amount in a short time. And that's why I believe that soft drinks are more dangerous than solid foods containing the same amount of sugar. Because the kids out in the tennis court drink a big 16-ounce soft drink, and it's down. And then suddenly they get this big wave of fructose. And since it's the energy depletion in the cell that drives the metabolic syndrome and not the fructose in calories, the fact that you get a large amount in a short time leads to a greater depletion of energy and a greater metabolic response. So it's not just about the amount of sugar, but how fast you take it. That is important.
That makes sense. So we should, even as adults, probably should limit fruit juice to 6 ounces a day.
Absolutely.
And as far as sodas, all soft drinks, all that sort of stuff, we shouldn't drink them at all.
Correct. Right. Absolutely correct. Now, another discovery that our group has had, and actually this is not really our discovery, but it's just not appreciated out there. So most people know that to get fat, that usually, there's a famous law, the law of thermodynamics, and it basically says that the energy in has to equal the energy out. And so the concept is that if you eat excessive amount of food and you exercise too little, that the only way that the law of thermodynamics holds is for you to accumulate some of that energy in the form of fat. So if you take in so many calories and you don't burn the same number of calories, you're going to retain them, and that will turn into fat over time. So it's widely recognized that people who are overweight are often eating in excessive amounts and exercising too little. And you know this because you see the big plates and the second helpings and the smorgasbords and all the kind of food that people are being given, and the big gulp. It went, the soft drinks went from 7 ounces to 12 ounces to 16 ounces to 20 ounces to supersize. And so we all know that that's associated with obesity, and we all know that the watching TV and the internet and the escalator and the elevator and all the things that make life easier for us has reduced our exercise. And so everyone has said, obesity is driven by our culture. It's the fact that we're giving big plates. It's the fact that our culture is focused on the internet and TV. And so the thought is that the reason we're getting obese is because of our culture. We're to blame. All we have to do is just reduce the number of calories we eat, exercise more, and we're going to get thin again. And this is what largely the world says. And it isn't quite that way. So here's what is actually happening. What is actually happening is that as we eat sugar and fructose, and there are other things that can do it too, but this is by far the dominant mechanism. We actually, when you eat a lot of fructose, it actually, during this metabolism and this energy depletion that occurs, a very unique thing happens, and we lose our ability to control our appetite. And the way we lose our ability to control our appetite is we become resistant to a hormone called leptin. And this is known. This is actually known that leptin resistance is present in people who are overweight, and leptin controls our appetite. And it's known that overweight people can't control their appetite as well because they're leptin resistant.
Okay.
And we reported that fructose given to animals makes them leptin resistant. So what turns out is the reason we're getting bigger plates isn't because the restaurants are just trying to stuff us. It's because they are responding to our needs we actually would like bigger plates. We're still hungry when we're done with our regular meal because we're leptin resistant, and the restaurants are responding to us, not the reverse. Okay? The restaurants aren't driving it. We're driving it.
Well, that is...
Yeah, and let me tell you the other half. The other half is that the way this works is as follows. When you deplete the energy in a cell with fructose, it causes, I hate to bring this up, but it's called oxidative stress. And basically, it's like, it's an inflammatory process that is occurring in the cell, and it hits a part of the cell called the mitochondria, and that's where the ATP is produced, the energy is produced. And what happens is, as there's less energy produced, that triggers the cell to hold on, to start accumulating fat. And the way it accumulates fat is by blocking the oxidation of fat. So normally you burn fat, but what happens is when you eat fructose, you suddenly block your ability to burn fat. So not only is the fat accumulating, but you can't burn fat, and that's a major way to make energy. So your body's energy falls. And the ATP levels actually fall in your tissues. And obese people have low ATP in their muscle. And they have low ATP in their white cells. They have low ATP in their liver. So they're not making enough energy. And the lower the ATP, the more tired you are. It's been directly linked that the energy level in the muscles relates to the energy level in your body. So suddenly, you don't have the energy.
Right.
So you're sitting around. So the TV shows have learned how to make great TV shows. The internet has learned how to make great game shows, and because they know that you're going to be sitting there. They did this. Yeah, I'm just going to finish one thing. Go ahead.
We need to come back to this. We need to take a break.
Okay.
But this is a fascinating subject, and we need to come back to it.
Sure.
If that's okay. All right. Time for a break, and then we'll be back.
Thanks.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
There are a lot of health questions that your doctor doesn't always seem to have the time to answer. Every week, you can have these questions answered and find out a lot more about how to improve your health on Getting Real About Nutrition with Lisa DeFazio. You'll talk to Lisa and her guest experts about diets, meal planning, healthy food ideas, and medical issues. We'll also talk about foods to avoid, allergies, and supplements you should or shouldn't be taking. Listen every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel.
Have you figured out what's not working in your life? Could you use a little help? Join your host, Tamaran, for Let's Figure It Out. Tamaran has had both highs and lows in her life. She uses her experiences to teach you some basic techniques on how to live a better life through health, relationships, and more. Her guests also come from the health and wellness industry, and together, Tamaran and her guests will help you get your life on the right path. Let's Figure It Out airs live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are tuned in to The Joys of Healthy Living. To connect with Dr. Dodge or his guests, please call into the program today at 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email to dr.ed.dodge@gmail.com. Now, back to more of this week's program.
Welcome back to The Joys of Healthy Living. Our guest today is Dr. Richard Johnson, who is an expert on sugar and specifically fructose. He's a teaching physician and a practicing physician. He's in charge of kidney and high blood pressure section at the University of Colorado Medical Center. In the last segment, we've been talking about fructose and some of the problems that it causes in the body. It is at least a double-barrel threat and maybe a triple-barrel threat to health. And Dr. Johnson was explaining how it affects us in so many ways. It interferes with our ability to handle fat and burn fat. And so, Dr. Johnson, I wonder if you could continue the discussion of that.
Yes, so basically what I was saying was that there is evidence that the reason we are eating more than we should and exercising less than we should is not because we're choosing to do so. It's not because our culture is telling us, is giving us larger plates and the internet is making us exercise less. It's actually a metabolic consequence. It's directly related to changes that are occurring in our body that make us want to eat more because we've lost our satiety response or our appetite, our control of appetite. And we are exercising less because we have less ATP or energy to exercise. And there was a great study done a number of years ago in which they took children who were watching TV. And the children were watching like 24 hours of TV a week. So the hypothesis was that we could make them lose weight and exercise more if we took the TV away from them. So half of them were randomized to have their TV reduced in half, and they had little monitors on the TV so they could do this very accurately. And the half of them, for a period of time, only got to watch like 10 or 12 hours of TV a week, and all the control kids were still watching 22 or 24 hours of TV a week. And at the end of the study, there was a big surprise because the kids that reduced their TV watching, their physical activity didn't go up at all. In fact, it went down.
Really?
Exactly. And so, the whole point was that, physical activity it's not the TV that's making us inactive. We're inactive, so we're watching TV, and that's what's going on. And our work suggests that the reason we're becoming inactive is because of fructose.
And because we have too much sugar in our diet, and we get that supplied by so many different sources of food in our diet.
That's right. So, for example, we did a study here where we took mice, and we put fructose in their water, and after about 2 or 3 months, those mice were, twice as fat. They were huge compared to their litter mates who just got water and ate regular chow. But what was particularly interesting was that the more fructose they ate, the more they lost their control of appetite, or their control of their appetite. So they started eating more. They started eating more than the normal mouse. So that they not only did they get their calories from the fructose in the water, but they still kept on eating lots of chow.
Okay.
And we put little laser lights across the little cages that would actually monitor their activity. And they spontaneously developed lower activity. They just became content sitting around. And, so it kind of shows that you can actually make an animal fat and tired just by giving it sugar or fructose. Wow. And so this is why fructose is so dangerous, because if you, for example, give a different kind of food to an animal, their physical, you give them food, if you give them more food, they just exercise more. They produce more energy. You give them less food, they produce less, but they stay in balance. But you give sugar, and they lose their control of their appetite. So it's what triggers the weight change.
So, and the problem is that we've, in the last 30 years especially, we've been consuming a lot more high fructose corn syrup in our foods and drinks. But sugar itself has fructose in it, so that is a problem also, isn't it? Yeah,
sugar. Did you say sugar? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so regular sugar is 50% fructose, and high fructose corn syrup is also made up about approximately half with fructose. It's got a little bit more. There are some differences, though. So we're actually doing some studies And remember, when you take table sugar or sucrose, it's actually a glucose and a fructose bound together.
Right.
So when you ingest it, it actually gets degraded in the gut first to free fructose and free glucose. So there's some delay in the metabolism.
Okay.
And then you absorb the fructose. But when you take high fructose corn syrup, the fructose and glucose are already separated. So we have hypothesized, but I must make the point that we haven't proven, but we've hypothesized that when it's free fructose and free glucose, that you might absorb them faster because you don't have to wait for the sucrose to be degraded. And since it's the concentration in the liver that the fructose it's the concentration of fructose in the liver that drives the energy depletion in this metabolic response, theoretically, high fructose corn syrup might be worse than table sugar. And the evidence for that is we did publish a study where we gave sucrose or free fructose and free glucose mixed together, and we looked at the effects on, this was in laboratory animals, but we looked at the effects on the liver, and sure enough, we did see a tendency for more fatty liver when the fructose and glucose were given freely.
Okay.
Another group actually gave high fructose corn syrup or sucrose where that was only provided at night, and they also saw more fatty liver and worse obesity, especially worse obesity with the high fructose corn syrup. And we recently did a study where we gave people a soft drink that had high fructose corn syrup or the exact same drink but with sugar, sucrose. Mm-hmm. And we did see a higher blood level of fructose and a little bit higher blood pressure response to the high fructose corn syrup group. So there are some subtle differences, and I do think that the subtle differences suggest that sucrose may be safer than high fructose corn syrup, but I don't want to give the wrong message. And the right message is that people are eating too much sugar and too much high fructose corn syrup, and probably should reduce both.
Right. So there's been quite a bit of publicity about high fructose corn syrup and the dangers of high fructose corn syrup in the last few years. I think, is there any evidence that we're starting to decrease our consumption of it at all?
Yes. So what's interesting is right around 2000, the amount of sugar intake started to level off, and so did obesity rates. Okay. And so the two are directly in link. And there's been a lovely study that was done in California where they actually banned soft drinks from schools in certain districts, and they've gone back to those districts, and they're actually seeing a fall in obesity rates among the young. So the movement is going the right way, and things like Lautenberg's proposal for the Farm Bill and Mayor Bloomberg's proposal to ban 16-ounce drinks.
Right.
There's a lot of movement going on to try to reduce the amount of sugar intake.
Okay, well, and that's good. Well, what do you think about banning soft drinks in schools? There's vending machines in most schools today. How should that be handled?
Well, I think it's a good move to get it out of the schools because adolescent obesity is such a major problem. But there was the worry that the kids would then just, binge when they get out. And, there is some truth that in mice, if you give sugar only at night, like in the water at night, and during the day you take it away, the mice sit there and they wait, and they're like all excited, and they're waiting for their sugar water. And as soon as you put it in, they're right there. So there is this, because it is addicting, they wait for it. So the problem with banning it from schools is that you worry that they're going to leave the school and immediately cross over and get one of these big super gulp type drinks, and then that could be worse because they could just be pounding it down. So I do worry about that, but I do think that there's some evidence of success of this approach in California, although it's mainly for the younger kids. And so maybe the older kids who have money to go and binge when they get out, maybe. So I don't know if that's the most effective approach. I do think that labeling of soft drinks, saying, like they label cigarettes and say, in excessive amounts, this has really been shown to cause, this has been shown to cause obesity or something like that would be good. I also think sugar tax is a good way to reduce intake. There's some very good data from the 1800s when there was a sugar tax that it did lead to fewer people. I mean, there was less sugar consumption, and then when the sugar tax was repealed, sugar consumption went way up. So that might work. The idea of actually banning 16-ounce drinks, I don't know if there's the idea of banning completely, raises the question. It's like banning alcohol. We know that first it didn't work, and secondly, it's not really it raises the question is, should banning be done? I don't believe in banning sugar. Right. So the question is, should you ban a 16-ounce drink? I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah. It's like too much Big Brother government.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the problem I have is I know it's bad for you. So I do feel it's a good move, but the question of whether it should be actually banned or just perhaps taxed. I mean, I don't like the idea. If you go to a lot of these restaurants, they have free refills. Mm-hmm. I think that should be eliminated. I mean, it's too easy for a kid just to drink 3 or 4 Cokes at one sitting. It's just not a good move.
Yes. Let me ask you, what about diet drinks? What's your thoughts about them?
Well, diet drinks, they because of the sweetness, they actually activate the sweetness and the taste buds, and it stimulates dopamine in the brain, and that gives a pleasure response, and so that may encourage food intake. So there's been concern that diet drinks might encourage food intake. However, most studies suggest that diet drinks don't increase the risk for obesity. But if it does, it might be through that mechanism. But most studies suggest diet drinks do not increase the risk for obesity. They certainly don't embrace this pathway I've told you. Okay. And interestingly, the dopamine response in the brain is much less than with sugar. And interestingly, if you knock out the taste buds so that a mouse can't taste the sweetness, there's no dopamine response to artificial sugars, but they still get one to fructose or to sugar. So sugar is, induces a response even if you can't taste it. Artificial sugars, diet soft drinks and so forth, there's other concerns for them that aren't related to obesity, but are related to the potential toxic effects of some of these chemicals like aspartame, for example, has been associated with brain cancer in rodents at high doses, and saccharin's been associated with bladder tumors in rodents. But it's not been shown in people, but, you always worry that maybe they haven't done enough studies to really be certain. So, I would prefer people to drink water.
It's the best drink, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, great. Can't say anything wrong with water, right? And, low-fat milk, great, wonderful. And tea, coffee, good. In fact, coffee reduces the risk of metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, so that's a good choice.
Okay.
So there's lots of choices. You don't have to drink diet drinks, but...
Good. Well, let me go back to fructose and some of the other effects of fructose. It raises blood pressure, you've suggested, and it also raises insulin resistance and the danger of prediabetes and diabetes. What's the pathway in this?
Okay, well, we've been very interested in this. So it turns out that when fructose gets metabolized in a cell, and there's that energy depletion. During the process of energy depletion, the ATP that's in the cell gets broken down. It's lost. And when it gets broken down, it generates a substance called uric acid.
Okay.
Now, uric acid is what causes gout. So there's a lot of people who get arthritis of their big toe or other joints, and it's due to high uric acid in their blood that crystallizes in the joint. But uric acid is also high in people with obesity and in people with metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, and so it turns out that when the uric acid goes up in the cell in response to fructose, our group believes that it actually may have a role in driving the insulin resistance and high blood pressure response. Now, I must admit that not everyone embraces this, but our studies would strongly suggest it could be involved. And we believe that the uric acid is working through the mitochondria, and that just like it causes that you get fat accumulation in the cell, that the uric acid is inducing oxidative stress, and that this is associated with the development of insulin resistance and an elevated blood pressure. We have good data in animals and in cell culture to support this. The studies in humans are pretty early, but there are already some studies suggesting that lowering uric acid may lower blood pressure in obese adolescents. And we published a paper in the JAMA on this. And Dr. Feig, who led that study, has also got another study in press showing similar results. So there may be a role for fructose in raising uric acid and increasing the risk for high blood pressure, and also for diabetes. And we now know that uric acid is a very strong predictor for both the development of diabetes and for the development of high blood pressure. Wow. And so it's a very exciting new area because it suggests that there may be a treatable risk factor that we haven't been treating. So just like we have cholesterol and other things that we're looking at, our studies are opening up the door that serum uric acid, which is easily measurable, may actually be another indicator for risk for developing diabetes and obesity and hypertension. And there's some evidence that lowering the uric acid may actually help prevent these very serious diseases.
Okay, well, that's great. We're going to need to take another break, and then we'll be back for our last segment in about 2 or 3 minutes. So thank you very much, and we'll be back.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
Tune into the Voice America Variety channel on the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Voice America Variety broadcasts a diverse array of topics reaching a global community. Our experts come from all walks of life, and the topics they discuss are everything from current events, arts and entertainment, leadership, parenting, relationships, self-improvement, career advice, and a variety of other topics. Check us out today. You're sure to find something of interest. Voice America Variety. Talk on today's hot topics.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are tuned in to The Joys of Healthy Living. To connect with Dr. Dodge or his guests, please call into the program today at 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email to dr.ed.dodge@gmail.com. Now, back to more of this week's program.
Welcome back to The Joys of Healthy Living. Our guest today is Dr. Richard Johnson, who is a professor at University of Colorado Medical Center, specialist in investigation of sugar, the problems caused by sugar and fructose, and he has seen multiple kinds of health effects from that are not good due to fructose. So I wanted to ask Dr. Johnson about something like potatoes, which we often hear that potatoes are a problem because they're high starch. But how much of a problem are they? I wonder if you could talk about that.
Sure. So, potatoes, pasta, pretzels, foods like this are starches. So these are polymers of glucose. There's no actual fructose in these carbs. And in our original work, we were primarily concerned just with fructose because in our animal studies, it was the fructose component that was responsible for causing the metabolic syndrome. And it was fructose that made you become obese and lose your control of your appetite and lowered the energy in your cells and so forth. And so in my original book, The Sugar Fix, I actually suggested that we don't necessarily need to restrict carbs other than those that contain fructose. Okay. And I still believe that to a large extent. However, under certain circumstances, our group has been able to show that if the kidney gets flooded with glucose, that it can convert some of the glucose to fructose. Oh. And this is a big discovery. We haven't actually published it yet, so this is early work. But the data is pretty clear. And we can show that it's the fructose from the carbs that's actually driving the insulin resistance and obesity and fatty liver. So we believe that it's that fructose is still the culprit. But the question is, there's some evidence that under certain conditions, some people are converting some of their regular carbs to fructose. And I've been aware that many people do very well with a low fructose diet. I developed a low fructose diet that basically allows you to eat carbs, but you just have to avoid carbs that contain a lot of fructose. And the diet works. I mean, we actually ran a trial with it in Mexico, and it does reduce metabolic syndrome. We're doing another one there right now, and it does work. But I'm not sure if it's superior to a low carb diet. It may be we haven't run it up against a low carb diet alone. So we do know that the low fructose diet is effective, but it may be that it's possible that a low carb diet could be better. The trouble is it's very hard to tolerate a low carb diet. But we think that if the low carb diet is better, it's particularly for those people who are converting some of their carbs to fructose. So, because a low fructose diet wouldn't restrict potatoes, for example. Yet, if you're one of those unfortunate people who can make fructose from the potato, you might benefit being on a low carb diet as opposed to a low fructose diet. At this point, we don't really know how common the conversion is occurring in people, because most of our studies have been in laboratory animals. But what we do know is that if we put glucose in the water for a mouse, that he will start converting that into fructose, some of it into fructose in his liver. And if we block the fructose metabolism, we can protect that animal from developing insulin resistance or fatty liver. So there's definitely there's some production of fructose that can occur in the animal, and it's from carbs, and it's primarily from glucose. So we just, at this point, don't absolutely know how important it is in humans, but there are some people who will tell you that they can't lose weight unless they go on a low-carb diet, and it's conceivable that those are the people who are most likely making the fructose from carbs. So the long-winded answer to your question is, what I tell people is if you're not overweight and you want to prevent yourself from gaining weight, just reduce sugars. That's good enough. But if you are overweight and you want to lose weight, go on a full low-carb diet.
Okay. Just reducing sugars probably would be beneficial for almost all of us. The American Heart Association, I believe, has recommended now to keep added sugars to less than 6 teaspoons a day for females and less than 9 teaspoons a day for males. Do you think that's a reasonable recommendation?
It's a wonderful start. They need to keep going, but it's a wonderful start. I think that we should probably reduce it by another third or so, but it's a good start. Thankfully, they're beginning to realize the importance of sugar and obesity, and more studies now are supporting this association and a mechanism. So I think it's a cheers to them for finally doing this, and they need to go further, but it's a good start.
Okay, and so bring it down to, say, 3 or 4 teaspoons a day.
Yeah, I think probably that's right. And I'm not totally against sugar, I think that people should have birthday cakes. I think there should be special occasions where you get to have your whatever kind of sweet you want. But the idea of having a dessert every day, or going out for ice cream every night, or having your sugar fix every day, that's going to get you into trouble. So I think it's moderation.
Well, let me ask you this: if on a population scale that everybody followed the American Heart Association recommendations and cut the sugar down to, say, 6 teaspoons a day or less, how much of an impact would that have on our chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, stroke, and so forth? Do you think we'd make
It would be huge. It would be huge, Ed. Yeah, it would be incredible.
So we could do a great deal to improve our health just by reducing the sugar in our diet.
Oh, absolutely, and it would have a major impact on healthcare costs. It would be the best thing we could do.
That is pretty amazing. It's pretty fundamental.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other recommendations that you have for people as far as their eating habits?
Yes. The other thing that we discovered by discovering this pathway was that other foods that can raise uric acid significantly may also have a role in obesity. And the number one food after sugar is beer. And I know there's probably people listening on the radio right now who are going, no, don't tell me that. But beer also is unique among the different alcohols in that beer really raises uric acid. And it turns out it's not from the beer itself or from the alcohol in the beer, but it's from the yeast and so forth that's been added. And in fact, even non-alcoholic beer raises uric acid. And the association of beer with the beer belly is not coincidental, okay? And the abdominal obesity that they get, and they also get, I don't know if you know it, but beer drinkers get high triglycerides, they get elevated blood pressure, they get fatty liver. It's all part of the same thing. It's basically a type of metabolic syndrome, and it's probably the same general mechanism. It's just that so reduce your beer. Drink, drink it occasionally. Don't drink 3-4 beers at a time.
Okay. Very important information.
You're welcome.
You have a new book that's just coming out, and I wonder if you could say just a little bit about that.
Yes, it's the culmination of all the work we've been doing. It's called The Fat Switch, and it's being published through the Dr. Mercola's website, so it's at mercola.com. It's going to be coming out in mid-August, and it's the grand scheme. It tells the story of how we have trying to track down a switch that turns on and off fat, which, by the way, is triggered by fructose, and we can show that this switch is driving obesity. We have evidence that it's actually a master switch that all animals use, and it's a kind of a grand story that I tell where we include everything from history and evolution, modern diseases. We show how this can be involved in a variety of other diseases like food allergy and celiac disease, kidney diseases, and it's actually state-of-the-art science. It's highly illustrated, 60 or so figures, and it has it's written for the layperson, so it's really tried to put it out in a simple way, and I think it's gives a big clue to what's driving the whole epidemic of obesity and diabetes.
Sounds like it's going to be a wonderful book to read, informative, and would be great for our readers to know more about that. I hope we can have you back sometime to talk about that book.
I would love to. I'd love to come back. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
You're doing a great job trying to bring healthy living to your listeners, and so it's a great pleasure to be on here and to at least talk about some of the perils of excessive sugar intake. The main thing is to reduce it. You don't have to let it go. Just have to reduce your intake. That's the key.
Be moderate, but really be moderate at fairly low levels.
Yeah, try to cut your sugar intake by half, and see if you can, live with that. If you get the desire for something sweet, go get a natural fruit, and start like that. That's
a great suggestion. Cut your sugar intake by half and do it with natural fruit. Wonderful.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of our show. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. This has been very enlightening, and I think our listeners will get a lot of information from this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. And I think that completes our show for today. So I'll sign off and say thank you.
Thank you again for listening to The Joys of Healthy Living. Please join your host, Dr. Ed Dodge, again next Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. Until then, enjoy good health this week.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio.